Mic check. 1 2 1 2. Hello. Mic check. 1 2 1 2. Hello. Mic check. 1 2 1 2. There we go. All right. So here we are, one day before Jake Paul versus Anderson Silva. This is probably the two toughest matchups for both of their careers. So why do I say that? The reason why is because this is the first time that Jake Paul is fighting an actual boxer. Now, everyone's always going around saying that, oh, he's not fighting real boxers. Well, Anderson Silva is 3-1. His last loss that he had in boxing was back in 1998. And so you got to put that into perspective. Also, the fact that he's not too far away from beating the likes of Chavez Jr., which was just a little about a year ago, not even a year ago, as a matter of fact, or maybe a year ago. The fact of the matter is, there's no reason why Anderson Silva can't win this fight. Chavez Jr. went into a decision with Canelo. So basically, Anderson Silva had to do Canelo things in order for him to not only survive, but win this fight against Chavez Jr. Now, you look at Jake Paul, there's something very interesting about his demeanor during this fight week. I noticed that he's very respectful. I notice he's very nonchalant and very stoic in the way that he's approaching this fight. And I think that this is not only going to be one of his toughest matchups, but also one of those types of matchups where you can basically look at Jake Paul in different light. You saw him in a Nate Robinson fight. It was mostly beef. There was really no respect in that aspect. And the same thing with Ben Askren as well. You could say that. The same thing with Tyron Woodley in the first fight, maybe not so much in the second fight. The bottom line is Jake is now seeing a little bit of everything. This is the reality of what most boxers go through. Not every fight that they go through is beef, even though beef seems to be one of the most entertaining aspects of combat sports. The other aspect of combat sports is the simple fact that you're basically fighting guys that are trying to do the same thing that you are, which is what? Trying to move up the rankings, trying to basically make money for your family, provide for everybody around you, and to have a better life. And with that, you're not really going to go into your fights excited in the sense of trying to talk trash to your opponents every time. Not every fight is about beef. However, most fights are about trying to move up the ladder, trying to move up the rankings, trying to move up the belt ranking systems or the sanctioning bodies and the different rankings that they have. That's the reality of boxing. That's the reality of MMA for the most part as well. So this is why this fight is very interesting in the aspects of seeing Jake Paul in a different light, seeing Anderson Silva fight a young, hungry prospect in boxing right now. Because let's face it, if Jake Paul was to win this fight, the WBC and other major sanctioning organizations are already claiming that they're going to rank Jake Paul, which means he's not going to be too far away from a title fight 3, 4, 5 fights down the road. So this is what's at stake in this fight. And also, what's at stake for Anderson Silva is the reputation of MMA fighters going into boxing. As we've seen in the most highlighted marquee matchups with Conor McGregor and Floyd Mayweather, you got to think to yourself that it was not a very good representation of MMA going into boxing, primarily because Conor lost, but Conor did tag him a few times and he did hit Floyd with an uppercut. But nonetheless, the experience that Floyd had in boxing basically overshadowed every single skill and attribute that Conor McGregor had to bring in that fight. So he was not a good representation of that. Then you had the likes of Frank Mir, was not a bad representation of MMA when he went in there and fought Steve Cunningham, a guy who had knocked down Tyson Fury as a cruiserweight moving into heavyweight. So you got to think about that. These are really important things to think about when you go into this fight, considering that Anderson Silva has the pressure of the mixed martial arts community to basically redeem the honor in the likes of what happened with Ben Askren, Tyron Woodley, and all these other MMA guys that have fallen into fighting these boxers. Who else was a famous mixed martial artist that went into boxing? You had Clay Collard. He made a very good representation of himself. Clay Collard went in there and he fought the likes of top ranked prospects that were undefeated. Bob Arum basically thought that, okay, we're going to bring this MMA guy in here. He doesn't know how to box. And next thing you know, his unorthodox style that he learned from MMA was just too much for a lot of these top rank prospects that they were bringing up. All these guys that they were trying to feed, they thought that they could just bring an MMA fighter in here with the likes of Clay Collard and beat him and make him a name off of him and then move up the rankings. They thought wrong. Same thing with Anderson Silva when he fought Chavez Jr. Everybody was saying, yeah, Chavez Jr. Is going to beat this guy because you know what? He's just a boxer and that's just what boxers do. And he's an MMA fighter. But the thing is, styles make fights. Anderson Silva has the type of style that is very transferable to boxing. He's got great head movement. Anderson Silva has the range. He has the footwork and the hips to be able to move his head and to be able to move his body in directions to where he needs to create different punch options. This is something that Jake Paul has to contend with, and this is something where he really has to rely on his knockout power to put out Anderson Silva. Now, is he able to do it? Absolutely. Because for the same reason why this is going to be a very hard fight for both Jake and Anderson Silva. Why is it that Jake Paul is capable of knocking out Anderson Silva? Well, for the simple fact that he's younger, he's stronger, he's showed that he's knocked people out before, and it's not the first time Anderson Silva has been knocked out. As you've known, Anderson Silva was stopped by Uriah Hall, who, by the way, is in a co-main event of this fight against Levon Bell, who was a former American football player who knocked out Adrian Peterson in his last fight, only to come into this fight and fight now a seasoned MMA fighter in Uriah Hall. Anderson Silva has fought and got finished with the likes of Jared Cannonier. He's been finished twice by Chris Weidman and has been knocked out and had his leg busted, as you guys seen in that fight. So it's not highly unlikely that Anderson Silva is susceptible to injuries, is susceptible to knockouts. And that is why this is going to be a very tough fight for him, because now he's fighting a guy that's way hungrier than all these other guys that he's fought before. Why do I say that? Why would I say that Jake Paul is way hungrier than Anderson Silva in comparison to his last opponents? Well, you got to think that the type of pressure that Jake has on him, he's the type of guy that's been told, you know what, you can't do this. You're not a boxer. You're not a real boxer. But the thing is that these boxing pugilists create this unattainable goal to the average person of what a boxer should be. Now, is it possible that you could take an average person off the streets and then get him into a boxing ring, build up his record, build up his skills, and make him into a legitimate boxer? Yes. Yes. Why is that? Because you got to understand, it's really not that hard to get a pro license. There's a lot of journeymen out there that get pro licenses and lose every weekend just to pick up a paycheck. They're considered pros. They're considered fighting men. Even Tommy Fury went in and said something to the effect, well, Jake Paul has never fought fighting men, when they try to criticize his record about fighting these guys with 100 losses and things of that nature. He basically fired back saying, yeah, they're fighting men. They're fighting men and they have more experience than you, or this and that. They're real boxers and you're not. Understand something, folks. Anderson Silva is a real boxer, as much as Jake Paul is a real boxer. So this is why I say that it's the toughest matchup for both of them. So why do I say that they're both boxers? Because Anderson Silva has a real boxing record, 3-1. Regardless of his inactivity in boxing because of his career in MMA, he still is a boxer. And guess what? He's beaten a lot of guys using good boxing. He's used good boxing with the likes of Forrest Griffin. He's used great boxing with the likes of his previous opponents, and even with Israel Adesanya, the current 185 champion of the world right now. He's went the distance with him. He's fought him in a very highly technical matchup, and Israel Adesanya is known to be the best striker in mixed martial arts at the moment. That is, of course, until he fights Pereira next month, which remains to be seen, of which a guy that has knocked him out in kickboxing and now is going for his world championship in mixed martial arts. So, of course, that's a different side story for another day. But moving on to Anderson Silva and Jake Paul, I can see this fight going to a decision. because of the fact that how hyper prepared these guys are. Anderson Silva has prepared for this fight. Prepared for boxing for well more than a year now after his win with Cesar Chavez. He went in there, got a knockout against Tito Ortiz. And after that, he's just been focusing on boxing ever since. So this is a real boxer. And so is Jake Paul. But now he's fighting the toughest matchup of his life, the toughest matchup of his career. And it really showed that he is taking this seriously in two ways. Number one, he's not manufacturing beef for this type of fight. He's being very honest. He's telling you that, you know what, I met Anderson Silva when me and my father were out selling t-shirts in Ohio. And because we didn't even have a VIP pass or something like that to some fan expo that they had going on, he basically said to the effect that, yeah, we had to get the ring card girls to get us to meet Anderson Silva because we didn't have enough money to basically go out there and have the VIP section of whatever fan expo they were at in Ohio. But you got to think that that's a very honest statement in Jake Paul. He's telling you straight up that, you know what, even though I'm this rich YouTube kid that has all this money, has all this fame, I came from humble beginnings, just like most of these boxers. And everything that I just explained to you, it's basically the reality of what most boxers go through. Not every boxer goes into a fight with beef. Not every boxer goes into a fight where it's mayhem, where it's the same situation you've seen with UFC 229 with Conor McGregor and Khabib. It doesn't have to be like that all the time. Sometimes you can go in there and box somebody that you really respect, or fight somebody in a cage that you really respect, just out of the sheer will of trying to prove I am better than this guy. I am more skilled than this guy, and I am trying to move on to my career and whatever it is that I want to do next with my life in boxing or mixed martial arts. So how do I see this fight playing out? I see this going to a decision because of the fact that Jake Paul has never been knocked out before. And for Jake Paul to knock out Anderson Silva would be a tall task, considering that, yes, Jake Paul has knockout power, but his boxing skills may not be up to par to be able to catch somebody like Anderson Silva, who has great head movement and, quite frankly, can't even be caught at the highest level with the likes of Cesar Chavez. You got to take into consideration, it's really important to understand that Cesar Chavez went to a decision with Canelo. So what does that mean? That means that Anderson Silva had to do Canelo Alvarez things in order for him to win that fight. And by the way, shout outs to Zane Heavy Boxing Dosage, who's watching this right now. Thanks for the comment, brother. You guys go click and subscribe on his channel. And of course, click and subscribe and follow and like my Facebook watch channel down below. And enjoy the fights.